Hello there. Now it's going to take a moment while we wait for people to dial in. While we do so, I'm just going to begin sharing our antitrust policy notice. I'm going to give a quick overview of the antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting. The full antitrust policy can be found on the Linux Foundation website. And if you're from a Linux Foundation member company, you can talk to our counsel, Andy Updegrove, if you have any questions. And naturally, you can raise any questions on this call too. This meeting will be, I think, relatively short. For context, it's the second meeting of the OpenChain Export Control Workgroup. Our first meeting was primarily designed to bring together our community from Europe and also from Asia and give people an opportunity to discuss the current landscape regarding open source and export control. In this meeting, we are going to be continuing our discussion, but also our timing has changed. This meeting is primarily designed to ensure that if we have colleagues in the Americas who want to dial in, they are welcome to join. The meeting format will be to have some introductions, just a round table to see who's at the room. Then we'll have our open discussion, which will be the main body of the event. And then we'll move on to any other business if people want to add anything to the talk. To get started, let's do the introductions. So I'm Shane Coughlin, the General Manager of the OpenChain project. I would ask everyone to introduce themselves simply by their name and their company, organization, or the fact that they're unaffiliated. Every answer is valid. I will call out names and please do introduce yourself. So first up, Jan.
Hi, my name is Jan Thielscher. I'm from EACG. And Shane, I would want to bring your attention to the participation of Bert.
Yes, I just saw him enter.
Yeah, and probably concerning the agenda, we might have this on the topic because, as far as I remember, he's not too much. He has got some time limits.
Okay.
So
we'll cover Bert's stuff first.
Okay.
So
cool.
As soon as we do the intro, we'll cover Bert's stuff. Okay, then let's run through the intros quickly. So the next one is Anastasia.
Hello, I'm Anastasia Nayam. I'm from ARM. Matthew unfortunately won't be able to attend today, and Bernie as well. She was attending the previous call. She won't be able to attend today. So I will share the outcome of this meeting with them.
No problem at all, and it simply gives us an excellent opportunity to gossip about them.
Probably.
Bert. You are muted.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Well, it keeps muting me, but now hopefully it stays unmuted. I'm Bert-Jaap Koops, work at Tilburg University. I maintain the crypto law survey, and I was asked by Jan something about that, and he thought it would be nice to discuss it in this group. So I'm not affiliated with Linux or have anything to do with the group that you're setting up, but I'm interested in discussing the topic with you. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. We deeply appreciate that you are here. You will be the first topic on the agenda. Your website really caught our eye. Hacken.
Yes, Håkan Asberg. You work for Ericsson, and I belong to the open source program office.
Julian.
Hello there. I'm sorry I don't have the camera on. I'm in a car waiting for my kids. It's a bad timing here, but I'm glad to be here. Julian Kocha with ScanOSS, a tool that detects presence of cryptographic algorithms in open source.
Marco.
Hello, I'm Marco Berlinguer. I'm from Barcelona, and I'm a scholar at Institute of Government and Public Policy.
Perfect.
And I'm new at this group, so I'm trying to situate myself, and I will listen.
Don't worry, this group is also new. This is only our second meeting, so we are currently exploring. Stefan.
Still searching for the camera button. Here we go. Hello, I'm Stefan Tannheiser. I'm a software asset manager here at Adhovia in Karlsruhe, Germany, and I'm also a member of our open source governance board.
Great to have you here. And finally, Stephen.
Hello, this is me trying to turn the camera on and failing. Stephen Kilbane, I'm with Analog Devices in Edinburgh in Scotland, where I am the Open Source Program Office Director.
Brilliant. Now, because we have one or two new people on the call, I will just give a little bit of context of what we're up to. This is one of the calls on the OpenChain project. It's an open source project focused on a trusted supply chain. We have set up this export control work group because we talk about different types of compliance, and our community said, well, you know, we want to talk about export control compliance. We are new to talking about this, though we're not new to talking about compliance in general. We created the ISO standard for open source license compliance, and we have recently created a standard for security assurance in open source. In export control, we're not busy making a standard, we're busy exploring the field and setting the parameters. That's why the agenda is nice and simple, open discussion. We're seeing what we can usefully do. The call is informal. We're not expecting anyone to take a policy position. We're not trying to tell people what's good or bad about export control. And we don't expect anyone on the call to be an expert, even if they are. Last call, we were very lucky. We were lent some export control ninjas from companies like Ericsson, which helped set some context. And for that last call, we created a recording and outcomes, which is available online. I'm just going to put the link into the chat and very briefly share that screen to show you that on our website, there's a recording of the last call, and that can help inform you about how we got to where we are today. There is also some slides available, and the slides are available on this page, which is currently in draft mode, and I will try to move it out of draft mode so I can give you the actual link to it. One moment. There we go. These slides just summarize what you would see at the first link, but they do it in a prettier way. Now, one of the main things that we had in the last call was sharing various links. These links were a brain dump of what we knew about the field. Interestingly, when we shared these links, it was the first time that we'd ever collected them. I'm putting a link into the chat, which takes you directly to the spreadsheet I just showed you a moment ago. This is a landscape spreadsheet just being built out of the material we shared. I do apologize because the actual spreadsheet is not beautiful at all, but such is the nature of the creature. Anyone can edit it. If you go and open it, you can add links, you can add definitions, and so on. Now, one of the most interesting links that we came up with was an older resource, which was potentially very useful, a website called Crypto Law. And Crypto Law appears to provide information country by country, touching on export control. Now, we've never seen a resource like that available before, and it was raised, I believe it was you, Jan, who raised it, right?
No, it was someone else, but I was amazed by it, and that's why I got in touch with Bert.
Yes, my apologies if you didn't get credit. Uh, whoever raised it, you're wonderful. And Jan, thank you so much for arranging the call. And most of all, thank you very much, Bert, for taking the call. What we're seeing here is, for us, remarkable. Export control and open source isn't a field where we do a lot of work. And to be able to see overviews country by country is astonishing. It provides the potential for us to find our way when it comes to people who are doing open source and interested about export control, and go to things like our export control departments in companies and not look like complete idiots, and B, consider with this type of material and knowing the field of open source, are there things we need to do which would help the general approach to making sure that open source and export control play together nicely. Bert, I'm going to, if it's okay, I'll throw the floor open to you to explain your website, why you created it, and I believe you might have something to mention about how you'd like to see it potentially continued in the future.
That's right. I set this website up as part of my PhD research, which I did in the mid-1990s. You may recall, at least the older ones of you, that was the time of the first crypto wars. My PhD basically investigated the law enforcement concerns with cryptography used by criminals. And so I was particularly interested in domestic controls. So the debates about the Clipper chip and other proposals to build in backdoors into cryptography, or to outlaw cryptography unless it had a backdoor built in. Some countries considered this, and only a few countries did this in the 1990s. But while looking at the legislations, the export controls, which is a kind of the flip side of the domestic controls, turned out to be equally important. And over time, I think they were much more important for businesses because the domestic controls were well, they petered out the discussions. The crypto wars basically led to nothing except for legislation forcing people to decrypt or give their password, which some countries have passed. But backdoor legislation was dropped because it was a very bad idea. It still is. The export controls were very strict, I think, in the 1990s. So there were a lot of debates about this. Around 2000, they were relaxed significantly. So swapping from it's prohibited unless you have a permission to it's permitted provided that you notify a relevant authority. And that's in a nutshell, I think, the status of around 2000. Because I had spent a lot of time in building up this, I kept it up. Not very actively looking at all these countries, but because it was a website that was often visited, I got many messages from people giving me updates. So every so often, about once a year, I would update the page with new information I got from people about legislative changes. And I tried to keep that up, but at a certain point, well, other things got in my way, and I didn't manage to maintain the website. So since 2013, it has been standing still. That means that the information is rather outdated by now. Although I'm sure that much of it will still be relevant, although details may have changed. But it could well be that for any country, the information as is not reliable. So I would be very happy if someone else would take it up to update it. I have been approached in the past with requests to take over the website, but those were particularly from consultancy firms, I think, that were interested in the website as a resource to gain visibility. And I wasn't too sure that the reliability of the page, which I valued very much, was sufficiently guaranteed with consultancy firms. So I've held that off. What I have asked a former PhD student of mine whether he wanted to take over the website, and he said yes, but for all kinds of reasons, he turns out not to be able to do this, at least not in a significant way. And so it's still where it is today, being rather outdated. And I would be very happy if your group or someone affiliated to your group could come up with a scheme to, I think, first update the website with basic information. So for the most important countries or the countries you're affiliated with, to look whether the information is still up to date, and particularly for the export controls, I think, which you're primarily concerned with. And then to have a kind of governance scheme that someone or a group of people is responsible for keeping the website up to date, which might be in the hands of one person with the help of others or a group of people. I'm open to many things. The most I'm concerned about is the reliability of the website. I did some kind of quality control in the information I got, and I think that that partly ensured why it's a relatively good resource. But having said that, of course, I'm not a specialist in 50 countries. No one is. So it might be that a group of people with affiliations of companies that have legal experts in many countries might actually be quite an improvement to do quality assurance of the website.
Thank you very much.
Having said that, could you also go a bit higher up?
Sure, into the main website? Oh,
no,
just
because
up on
there
the page.
is a link to, what is it? There should be a link with, well, there is a link with maps, but that's not so interesting. The address list for crypto export licenses, the first bullet point.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Because I think that's also an interesting resource, because it has the contact departments of all the countries, at least those I know of, where you should apply for a license. And I think that would also be very helpful to update and keep updated.
That is interesting indeed. And you are in the right place in that the OpenChain project is run by user companies. So it's all companies using open source. There are vendors in our ecosystem. And for instance, we've got Julian from ScanoSS on the line. But the vendors are very much in service of the user company ecosystem, and all of our work groups and activity is basically companies doing this stuff. And we're interested in this resource. Just full disclosure before we throw open discussion across the room, because it's companies and because export control is such a serious matter, and the OpenChain project is housed by a trade association based in the US called the Linux Foundation, we're going to be super, super cautious about the OpenChain project taking direct responsibility for any resource. We want to make sure that we're not owning anything that anyone could mistake as a do this or don't do this. That said, there are plenty of options on the table for trying to ensure that resources like this are curated and looked after and updated. So what we're going to do now is open discussion and do a little bit of a brainstorm about, first of all, does this document have utility? Short answer, yes. And then B, do people think that they or people from their companies might be able to informally have a quick look at it and do refresh? So I'm going to throw the floor open and let the community go into free-for-all mode. Jan, over to you.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very valuable resource. And as you see, there is a lot of data and information in there. And I could imagine having run this as a kind of a Git repository, splitting the information probably in a type of a YAML file thing. So you can make the information that's in there probably machine readable. And probably it's possible that we have a group that is like organized like typically these software projects are, with a kind of not a TAC but a legal AC kind of committee that is taking care for updates and reviewing these updates, so that everybody can pull data and everybody can push data to it. But pushing then would require a review by not the technical committee, but the legal committee then. And this could be a circulating chair, for example.
On process level, I think that's clean and tidy. On the we don't want to take liability level, it might actually be better if this was purely ad hoc. That's just a side note. That's editorial. Okay. Anyone else have any ideas or comments? Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from not wanting to take liability angle to this, it's if one thing that could be done is of course if that repo belongs outside of OpenChain, it could definitely be a friend of OpenChain, but it wouldn't necessarily reside on the OpenChain GitHub. It could be somewhere else, and we could have that as a very good resource. And if people who are also active in OpenChain would like to be active in that repo with the governance structure that Jan mentioned, that could be one solution. But I'm as usual talking before thinking, so there's probably good reasons against that as well.
So Jimmy's our chairperson and reliably talks without thinking. I'm kidding. That's a very good point. And I think that having the update team operating outside of the OpenChain project would allow the flexibility potentially to just get this done. Bert, just so you know, this is a huge project. We have thousands of active contributors around the world. So there's bound to be a lot of people, if we point them at a resource and say, oh, you can have a look at this and potentially contribute, there's a lot of eyes on. Stephen, your hand is up. Over to you.
No, I'm just being nosy. So, Bert, what format is this stored in? I mean, is it just plain HTML web pages, or are they generated from something?
No, it's plain HTML. It's very 1990s.
Okay, I did wonder. The fonts look quite familiar. But yes, I like Ed's idea of converting it into something that is machine readable and things like that. A whole variety of different ways that could be done. And of course, that doesn't necessarily have any statement on the validity of the information, just the mechanical translation.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and if we did go down the route of saying to the community, oh, why doesn't someone set up the repo? A volunteer sets it up on their GitHub. And we start to work on something like YAML, would it also be possible to have a version of it which is still very easily human readable? So if we had a manager or non-technical lawyer wander in, they could also just have a quick nosy around.
I guess there would not be a problem in transforming MD to YAML or vice versa. But the more complex thing probably would be, and there we definitely would require someone who has really a sound understanding of potential things to treat with, is what are the things that we need to put as a kind of a hook into this. I mean, what are the typical things that are regulated here? Is it you require an authorization, you require notification, yeah, so to get a grip on this, to really make it somehow machine processable, because currently I see a lot of text and it looks a lot of like law information. It's not in the sense of clear, not, let's say, not really what I would want to process immediately. I would want to I need to read it and to understand it. Yeah. really grab the contents. And here I'm not sure whether we really find a way to make it machine readable.
Well, even if
You
it
mean-
stayed, oh, my apologies, go ahead.
No, if you mean with machine readable that it should be machine interpretable, then I think there is a problem, because except for things like this, the address information, but the content of the export controls is basically legal text, so explaining what the law is. And although you can to some extent express that in formal language, I don't think it works for this type of text to have it machine interpretable in that sense. I mean, a lot of work has been done into translating legal text into machine operable text, and that really requires simplifying to the point of making the legal text unreliable, I'm afraid. But perhaps I'm misunderstanding you, but
No, I think it's absolutely correct, and that underlines my impression. But probably the machine readability might be a second goal. Yeah, the very first goal might probably be just having it available in a country by country fashion as it is, and really make sure that it's more or less accurate. Yeah, which is probably more important. And then in the second step, we can think about what are the similarities. Is there something we can explicate, or are there typical grants or obligations, things that we can verify, and then derive this from the text and probably give it the legal background as a comment or something like that. Because in general, I mean, it will be that there are certain activities triggered, like you need to contact these guys, you need to make it get an approval, or you're just allowed, or yes, things like that.
Julian, hand up over to you.
a practical point is that
Thanks.
I have to leave in 1 minute. So
Okay.
I think
That's right.
you can continue the discussion. I've explained what I can.
Brilliant.
So I'm looking forward to hearing the outcome of your group, and I'm happy to discuss it further at some point. But for now, I'm afraid I have to go.
Thank you for your time. We will swing back to you. Much appreciated.
Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
In turn.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Julian, over to you.
Yeah, I was wondering if the machine readability is the main goal, or isn't it getting it in some kind of, let's say, Markdown or YAML or whatever it is, but the idea of having it in a Git repo, and rather than having a long text with all the countries, breaking it down by country so that people can contribute. So the ability to contribute perhaps is more interesting than the machine readability, which could be secondary or it could be important depending on if it is a country and then a bunch of text, maybe the machine readability is not very important. But if there are certain booleans or things that can be extracted from the legal text that could be useful, then that could also be valuable.
A good point. Stephen.
I was thinking along similar lines in that I think it's valuable to break the content up into particular countries at least, so that they are separately reviewable. And then you could, for example, just create a separate Git review for each and every country. So somebody can come along and review it at some point in time, and then you know that somebody's taken a look at it. I think being able to mechanically pull the information for a given country is valuable, even if all you get back is something that indicates we don't have any information, or here's a block of text you're then going to read. I think it's still useful to separate things in that way so that you can do some automation on it. And if you need to make corrections, then you've got a smaller thing to review, just corrections to a given country, not affecting the rest of the text.
I was muted because I'm an idiot.
Ah.
I was just,
I was thinking it wasn't that profound.
I was just saying it's a good point. And in the comments, we had an additional point raised, which was a note from Stefan saying, you know, the license of this document might be something to discuss as well, and maybe check the licensing of the material like CC by SA or similar. I'd suggest, and this is literally just a suggestion, that if possible, having it CC0 might be useful just so that people can take it and do anything with it, rather than making this a canonical resource. In other words, that this reference material would be completely fluid. That's just a note. Stefan, over to you.
Well, first of all, regarding maybe to come joint effort to open source project, I would agree that maybe splitting up the country information might be a first step, and secondarily getting it somehow machine readable. But well, getting people involved for separate countries, I think, would be a first step. And yes, of course, I'm always thinking about licensing. It's not quite the point yet, maybe, but as I got Bad Yarb right, he was just interested in keeping the information open. So I was just thinking about the CC by SA, but of course, might be anything else. But just wanted to maybe get in the point that as the main part of the material still comes from Bad Yarb, maybe we should take into account what he does want regarding his information on how it should be distributed. Okay.
Absolutely. It sounds like we've got a lot to chew on here. This is curiosity rather than asking someone to actually do it now. In principle, would anyone be willing to potentially set up a repo to get this going outside of the OpenChain project in the future, just out of curiosity?
I think it's not about the necessity to have a repo that will be simply done. The question is probably the organization that is holding the repo. And because, I mean, there would not be a problem to provide a repo and then say, hey, look, guys, this is cool information. You may use it, but without any warranty, because we cannot guarantee that's I mean, we have this governance process, but we cannot guarantee that it's really the latest state because we don't have that sort of update. I mean, this is, and then probably it would be something where we can say we try to contact or reach out the guys that are listed here as responsible departments, and probably they have an interest in serving this sort of update, because then on a particular resource, everybody can make or can easily find what people are expecting to be done now. So probably we can just be more, not really being the one who is supplying it, but probably facilitating the updates by these sort of government agency that are listed here.
Julian, over to you.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I mean, anyone could have a repository, a repo created. And I'm not a lawyer, but we do have lawyers here, and some that I know well. Would it not be enough with having a proper disclaimer on the? I mean, anyone could create a repository and start with a disclaimer that will free you from any kind of liability. And this is an exercise to try to understand and get common ground, and whatever the wording will be. I think that this is someone to hold the repo and someone to write a proper disclaimer that goes along with that. Or if I'm thinking right.
Mm-hmm. Given the sensitivity of export control, I imagine the essence of the disclaimer would be, this is not intended to be a canonical resource, no liability is taken, and nothing here is promised to be accurate in any way whatsoever. So I think there'll be a natural tension here between the tendency of organization towards building a consensus and validity versus the tension of trying to ensure that no one makes an assumption that this resource is either correct or not correct regarding your individual export control decisions. But that's definitely a topic for one of the export control lawyers to jump in on. I don't think we have the Ericsson team here today. Perhaps on the next call, we can ask the Ericsson export control lawyers to weigh in.
Yeah, exactly. I'm representing Ericsson. I think Jimmy just dropped off, but you're absolutely right, Shane. I think the trade guys from Ericsson hasn't joined today. Not sure why, but that's the case. I felt from the description early on in this during the discussion to have this updated. If there is a company, a multinational company with insights in many countries, regulations on the subject, I felt that was a perfect fit for Ericsson. But sadly, I don't know if we really, I mean, how. What would be the stance for Ericsson on this topic to actually do the updates and everything? That would have to be something for my colleagues then representing this, if that was the case. So, and also, Julian, I guess the friend you're referring to maybe was Jimmy, but sadly he had just dropped off when you said that. So I'm not sure the disclaimer.
Yeah, I realized that later. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
so hopefully I can bring my trade colleagues back into the call for the next meeting.
That would be great.
I'm only kind of watching this from the open source perspective. I'm not really that good into the trade stuff myself.
No, absolutely. And really just to reiterate for the record here, this is exploration call, and we're talking informally about this, so we're chewing it over. There's no commitments on any side, just points and ideas about how we can approach this. And this interesting resource has fallen into our lap, so to speak. So we're having a look.
And I don't think if we were to get somebody to host the repo in their organization, all they would be doing is hosting it and not requiring them to do any updates or any work on it. The idea would be that it would be hosted in order to be then worked on by a general community.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds like on this call, we have an emerging consensus that people find this interesting. There's plenty of ideas about what could be done with it. And, it's definitely something to look at. Well, could we see our community participants hosting it somewhere and working on it? It appears yes. And the next step is to see if we can get one of the export control lawyers to try to help us understand the parameters for doing that. What kind of governance or disclaimers are appropriate?
It's nice to see that it is really old HTML, which means it's much easier to parse. You haven't got lots of formatting in there.
Julian, your hand.
Well, actually, it's all the good HTML from the 90s, so that is actually pretty close to Markdown if you really think about it. But what I was going to say is that I understand that for if for a large company to make a decision whether or not they can host this repository, I'm sure that this is something that is not easy to answer. If that helps, scan OSS, I will have to check, and I'm sure that there will not be a problem for us to hosting the repository, provided that we have the right disclaimer in place, right? Because then, of course, we don't want the company to assume any responsibility. But being an open source company and being an open source repository, and there is here common interest in gathering information, I don't really see why would it not be a possibility for us to do it? If so, I can get back to you on that.
Absolutely.
Fast, a lot faster to get that answer for me than for Håkan.
Just a side note that Bert did express hesitation about vendors taking a repo. So please do check it out, but please don't take it personally if the answer is no. Okay.
I have this impression as well. I mean, opening up a repository is really the easiest thing, and the smaller the organization, the faster you get the decision done, especially when you have the right disclaimer. But I think it should probably be sort of a group or foundation or whatever thing that is taking this forward, and therefore I would agree that it makes sense to have really some group and not a vendor behind it.
Now, just to begin wrapping up this conversation, it appears we're sort of stuck until we get an export control lawyer to help us noodle on how people could coalesce around something like this. Hakan, could you take an action item to just go and check with the export control people in Ericsson? And I mean, if their answer is we're too busy or we don't want to talk about it, that's fine too. But if you could take it to them, that would be super.
Actually, we had a pre-meeting call. We had a meeting. I think it was Friday. So prior to this call, just thinking that how were we, because we were quite many in the first call from Ericsson. So trying to sync ourselves, so not having half the company in the meeting. And then we agreed that it was me and of course Jimmy listening in. And then Daniel, who participated last time, and who is the trade and the trade expert, that the two of us would continue on to join this meeting. So Daniel is not here in this meeting, but I'm pretty sure he will be in the next meeting, since that was what we agreed upon. But I will check with him. So yeah, I can take that action point to try to make him present in the next meeting.
Fantastic. Okay. We then have momentum that people like this. We have momentum that the author says he'd like to see it continued. And now we just feel out the parameters of what's appropriate there. And for those of you who are thinking, why is Shane so hesitant on this one? It's not that I don't like the resource and I don't want this to happen. I'm just being extremely cautious because several people from US companies just expressed that they want to be super, 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 super careful on this topic. So that's why we have lots of disclaimers. And I'm, being cautious. That doesn't mean I don't want to see stuff happen. Okay, let's move on quickly because we're nearly, I think, heading towards the end. And I just wanted to flag one thing. We had those great links last time, and I collected them into this spreadsheet. And I would like to suggest that you help. If there's any links to export control and open source that you think would be useful, if you could add them to this spreadsheet, I think that would be great. The purpose here is not to create some kind of wonderful resource that will solve all the problems and inform everyone about everything, but rather to begin just collecting the notes we had. I was interested on the last call that this was the first time we had shared this selection of links with each other, right? So it's like, well, we're really just beginning here. I just wanted to see if anyone had thoughts, or if the answer is, honestly, I think that's a waste of my time. Oh my goodness, 2 hands up. Good. Stephen and Jan both. Hi guys. Well, Stephen says he likes spreadsheets. Good.
Yeah,
but Jan had his hand up earlier.
I was still referring to the other thing. I had the idea because it was just shown on your screen, Shane. There is the address of the Wassenaar secretary. Probably we can talk to these guys and articulate the need for such a repository and point them to that direction and probably gain their attention. Because most likely these guys could be a facilitator of such a, I do not know what this, I thought that's only an agreement, but obviously they have a secretary doing something about it. So obviously he has got to do some maintenance work or whatever. And maybe this fits into that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually have the impression that once we have our parameters set, it's going to be super simple to find a home for this and super simple to get started so that the community participants who are interested can go and have a look and contribute. So I think the first thing is let's just get those parameters and then let's go find a home. We're lucky that our community is so big and I guess that lends some gravitas to the amount of companies and orgs that we can rely on. Just pulling this out of thin air. This is not a commitment or a note. I haven't even talked to them about it. But across the world, things like the China Academy of Sciences are also, deeply involved in the OpenChain ecosystem, and all types of orgs are there. Wow. Yeah. So I think the consensus then is that the most interesting thing here is Bert's website right now. And the spreadsheet is also not a terrible idea. So let's work on both. And Hacken has the action item to go and grab an export control lawyer and see if they want to talk.
There's also the third item, which was mentioned last time, which was the list of different algorithms that Julian put together.
Yes, the strong and weak crypto discussion. Great point. I'm just going to bring up the slides and I'm going to progress one slide on to any other business. Oops, I don't have a slide for any other business. Back to agenda. Any other business, then the strong and weak crypto algorithm list. So perhaps question is, can we go hunting for that? Julian, over at ScanOSS, could you ask your colleagues if there is such a list pre-existing, or is it something they're not aware of?
I actually put it together in a GitHub repo, and well, this is not the list. This is the list of the algorithms that we detect. It's a list to start with. Every company has its lists, and that list has the classification whether something is strong encryption or not, and if it is standard encryption or not. We don't have that classification. I mean, the minute there is some kind of consensus and there is some repository in GitHub or somewhere where people gather information and cooperate into getting that classification agreed, then we will, of course, incorporate that into the tool. But we don't want to adventure, as you can imagine, any kind of it will be kind of dangerous, I guess. So we just detect those algorithms, and we're always working in adding more. So that is an initial list.
Very cool.
But I'm sure that is not complete.
It's just good to have a list. Can you send a link to that GitHub repo to the mailing list?
You have it in that. You have it in the useful spreadsheet.
Oh, I do. Okay, so I'm officially an idiot. Here it is.
Good job, Shane. Well done.
I like myself. I think I'm good at this. All right, so there we go. There's the list of algorithms. Oh, that's quite good. So I guess one thing we can do then is, the question is there a strength threshold for strong or weak based on that particular characteristic? And we can go and ask someone and see if that strength threshold is something that we could say, in the US, over a certain key length, that's strong. And let's
if
go
anybody, somebody had to put together a big website full of different laws for countries, that might list that. It probably won't be up to date, alas.
The problem there is you can have a mathematical answer to whether something is strong or not, but that will rarely be matching the law. That is actually, I mean, that's interpretation of law, and that gap between law and math is what the key of the question is here, right?
Yeah, when Bert did his list, strong encryption was probably 4 bits.
And just to add to that, I mean, it's not universal. I mean, the US might have one definition, and the EU might have another, and depending on what other regulations we might have. I mean, if China pushes one or something, we might have a third, and they might all differ. So I guess that's one of the issues, right?
But
Sure.
given
Oh,
we
absolutely.
would be able to identify such differences, we could add it to these country lists, and this would definitely help to give orientation.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
but
it?
the country lists, isn't that kind of it's the interpretation, or rather, than just looking for Sweden. I mean, in Sweden, we are looking maybe at the EU, a list of EU and a list of the US mainly, and then whatever we do in our export classifications or export applications as a company towards the Swedish authorities for export control, we do that considering some part of the world where we are going to ship or where our customer is or something. And that might, depending on where our customer is, where the export is going to happen, we will have to consider various lists, so to speak. So
Yeah.
isn't this part of the problem?
Yes. And this is why we'll never have a canonical answer. So here we see, according to one regulation from 1999, Sweden allows crypto up to 128-bit symmetric, not asymmetric, to 60 approved countries, as long as that crypto is defined as mass market. So there's all kinds of provisos there on that regulation alone. Yeah. We're never going to get to a yes or no situation. We're only going to get to here's data sources consolidated, I believe, and then it'll be interpretation always on the individual corporate level. That's why we can never have a green or red light on this. And we don't want to. But maybe a community effort could organize this information better. Right now, this data is a sort of dump of data with all kinds of points. Maybe we can sort of look at how data can be better organized and presented so people can parse it quicker.
Maybe there is a way to, with little effort, get some shape to maybe 90% of the problem. The most common algorithms that you see everywhere, get consensus on those for every country, for example. And then you will never reach 100%, but maybe you can have a 75 or 90% of the problem sort of agreed upon. Right?
Yeah, in the same way that for open source licenses, you're not going to be able to fully interpret the text, but you can have common interpretations of your basic rights and obligations.
Exactly.
That are common.
Exactly.
And the end result of it kind of looks like this, probably, is a lot better from nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. We go for strong and weak in the same way we have permissive and restrictive and so on. Licenses.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Okay. So this raises a question of, let's say people coalesce and maybe set up a GitHub to work on Bert's material and maybe take some of the material here from ScanOSS. It may become a question of how to organize the information, which takes us beautifully to specs. I'm not suggesting we make a standard, but looking at the information here, it might be possible to split it up into items that would be easier to grok. So, in Sweden, try to pick up what crypto exports are allowed and then jurisdiction tags. And just to split the information into more chewable pieces. This is just a brainstorm idea, but it might be a useful way to take the data and turn it from a book into data points. All right, it's getting near the end of the call, so I suggest we wrap it up here. We've covered tremendous ground. One thing I liked on this call, I want to deeply thank everyone, is that we had, I think, a robust conversation. We have some definite different wants from the people on the call, and that's good. It shows that we're going to have a conversation here that's interesting. Let's get hacking to see if the export control lawyers can lend a hand on setting parameters so the community knows what they can do. And I just want to put a final proviso in. If you are an export control lawyer and listening to this recording and about to have a stroke, remember, this is an informal discussion. It's not a policy discussion. We're not taking a position on anyone defining what is right and wrong on export control. We are exploring the topic because it's the first time we've sat down and had a chance to do it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for that open discussion. We are rocketing towards the end of the meeting. I want to just especially thank Jan and also Stefan, Julian, of course, Hacken, and naturally Stephen as well, for particularly large contributions on this call. And for the record, a massive thank you to Bert for making himself available. It's 3 a.m. here in Japan, and I'm going back to bed. Close of meeting is announced. Have a beautiful day.
Shane, can I just ask you, Shane, to send out the link to the recording of this meeting?
Absolutely. It'll be available within 24 hours.
Yeah, you may get to sleep first, but when I get it, I can share it with my Ericsson colleagues, and that might help the discussion.
It will be out within 24 hours, and it'll be on YouTube and public. Thanks very much, Hacken. I'll make sure you get it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a beautiful day or night or middle of night, depending on where you are. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks all.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye. Good evening.